So for our ARPA grant, for this ARPA grant effort and projects, we talk about this as we're co-creating this. So this is an ongoing list and identifiers of all the different individuals and players in this and different roles and ways people can co-create and collaborate with us through this. So you'll see Place of Mind on there as myself and then four other core faculty and clinical consultants at Place of Mind, who are all on today and joining us today as well. So if you can see some, I know some people have videos on, some don't. So if you could see some faces, you can put faces to names too. Um, so that is Katie, Kristen, Allison, and Hannah. And we have been working really closely, especially for this first part of our project, with an organization called Active, and specifically the leadership, Jenny Felty, Lisa Duncanson, and Nate Hunt. And then the neurodiversity navigators, who we'll introduce in a bit as well, Morgan and Brianna. And then fellows. So we'll talk about the Humanizing Health and Healing Fellowship that we have engaged with some fellows around. And we have some fellows joining us today too, who we will also introduce at that time. And they're going to share some stuff with us too. So that's been the biggest part of this kind of initial phase of the redesign, the process here. We have collaborative faculty who are also joining with us and working with us in different consultation and collaborative ways. Marcy Brost, John O'Brien, and Aaron Smith. And then these other kind of labels, we are currently working with some folks, but we are going to add names and organizations as kind of that kind of develops. So guest faculty, we are going to have, and partner organizations and content experts who are individuals with lived experience. I'm going to explain all of these. So I'm not purposely trying to not explain them. I'm going to explain all of these in the context of the PowerPoint here too. And then stakeholders, which can be all of you as well. So we're all about anybody who is interested and passionate and curious and invested, whether it be professionally, personally, all the ways. We invite you to join us, and we'll talk about just the different ways that can happen. So this is all about a co-creating process of thinking about this redesign. So I want to start with this why question. So as I was thinking about what to kind of share today, I wanted to talk more about kind of the why. Why this redesign? What is this redesign, and why are we seeing a need for it? And as we meet and talk with other people, also lots of people are seeing a need for it. So I want to specifically put this in the context of when stuff comes up. So when stuff comes up, whether that be, concerning behaviors, crisis, mental health emergencies, when stuff comes up that really kind of shakes things up, gets people worried, gets people confused, activates, right? In whatever way that comes up for folks, what typically happens is the response to that is the human stuff gets lost. Why is that? Because when stuff comes up, we see it as something we have to stop. So all the things come up, right? Whether it be a diagnosis, a behavior, any of those things. It's focusing more on the thing we need to stop or fix or treat or cure or whatever that might be. And in focusing on the thing, the human gets lost. So a lot of our just inherent practices and how society views those things, right, really results in kind of a dehumanizing approach. So when stuff comes up, the dehumanizing piece comes in stronger. I tried to create kind of a visual here of what this is. So this dehumanizing, this focus on more of the transactional stuff, the fast, quick fix, we have to do something now, and really more of this doing to people and feeling responsible for people. Right. So a lot of stuff comes up, and I'm going to expand more on this dehumanizing. So there's a long history, right, in our society, in our practices, medical, long-term care, in those practices. When stuff comes up, this dehumanizing stuff tends to happen. And it's a paved road that's paved pretty straight and concrete sometimes, and those things can be peeling, right? When stuff comes up. Um, so we're trying to shift that a little bit and create a different response, and create structure and opportunity and accessibility to this different response as a common sense response, or a different path as a common sense response when stuff comes up. So that's why we're really focusing on this kind of behavioral health and crisis response side of things, because that's typically when um, the humanizing stuff gets missed or redirected towards other things. Um, so we're trying to bring to light, shine some light on this humanizing approach that even during those times, and I would argue, especially during those times, this humanizing approach is necessary. So that is relational, that is slower and intentional, and really focuses on being responsive to people, instead of responsible for and doing with people. So even in times of strain, crisis, emergency, kind of when we get pulled, right, to take that more dehumanizing route, there's still opportunity to humanize. Um, so that's the point of the grant, is to try to create a new path, a different path, not necessarily new as far as ideas, right? But a different path as kind of this response when stuff comes up. Ultimately, both responses are trying to support a meaningful life for people, right? But unfortunately, some of the more dehumanizing practices actually get in the way of the meaningful life, which we'll talk about. So when we think of, we are calling this humanizing. That's what that's the phrase that we have termed for this kind of different approach or different path. So when we think about this humanizing approach, it's this idea of focusing on neurodiversity, which focuses on differences, and tolerating differences and not automatically labeling differences as deficits or things we have to treat or fix or cure. That focuses a lot on inclusion and accessibility and supports and accommodations. That also focuses on health and wellness, but health and wellness as determined by each individual. So health and wellness does not look one specific way. So that is individualized based on the individual's own brain and body and their lived experience. And then focusing also on self-advocacy. So this understanding of the self, to understanding our own brains and bodies and supports and accommodations and psychosocial needs, which we'll talk about as well, and our own identity, our own self, and in those everyday life things, life decisions. And then also this focus on psychosocial or these human needs, right? This is why the humanizing piece is really important, because those human needs don't go away. And actually, they kind of become stronger when people are struggling. So a focus on the human stuff, right? The stuff that connects us all as humans, but also is really important to facilitating health and wellness, and um, meaningful lives. So focusing on things like support networks and citizenships and kind of these basic human needs, the stuff that all humans need, even if it looks different. So that's kind of the redesign. That's this humanizing approach, that um, we, in combination with all of our collaborators and co-creators, are trying to create a foundation for, knowing that it's, excuse me, an individualized route for each person. So when we think about this other path that's typically there right now, and we see it in all ways, shapes, and forms, is it's not just long-term care, it's how society views differences and tolerates differences as well, is this path tends to create a wall. So by just focusing on this dehumanizing path, which people typically get put on, right? When stuff comes up, when stuff gets difficult, because the focus becomes not on the human, it becomes on stabilization, on restriction, on normalization, on conforming or compliance and control, power over people, that there's one right and wrong way to be or to be healthy, and really ultimately results in social exclusion. A lot of othering happening, a lot of not even seeing humans as fellow humans when we get deep into those dehumanizing structures, practices, and systems that are currently in place. So it kind of creates this wall. And we've been trying to think about what contributes to this wall as individuals. And John O'Brien helped us start kind of this wall. So this is version 2.0. We'll probably have more versions of this, but just a start to helping think about what creates this wall here. And all of these things, with ultimately this devaluation and social exclusion being at the core of it. But things like loss of community, IMD admissions, focus on diagnosis or treatment or medications, low expectations, dehumanizing structures, isolation, ER utilization, psych meds, short-term fixes, funding constraints, loss of agency, reliance on police, rights restrictions, limiting habits, and professional dominance, right? So this is not a small wall by any means. This is complex, this is interrelated, this is nuanced, but nonetheless, what happens when this becomes the focus is individuals get excluded. So the goal of the grant specifically is our focusing on this emerging adult age group, trying to disrupt that. Because we know during that emerging adult stage, which I won't go too much into right now because I talked about it the last info session that you can listen to if you want more about the emerging adult brain. But it's a really critical time, and lots of transitions are happening during that time. And it also really sets up a person's reputation and the trajectory of the rest of their life. So especially with folks who find themselves in the long-term care system. So we're trying to disrupt that with this, disrupting the social exclusion that can happen specifically with neurodivergent emerging adults who find themselves on the other side of this wall, the more dehumanizing side of this wall because of the interrelationship of all of these things, plus probably some other things that we're gonna add to and maybe ask about at the end today if we have enough time to get to all the pieces. So we're trying to disrupt that because when stuff comes up, the human actually matters the most. That human stuff is what matters more and the most. So instead of seeing it as something we have to stop, whatever it might be, even though I get that might be the immediate human response is to want to stop something that's happening that's concerning, right? But instead of focusing on we just need to stop that thing or fix that thing or treat that thing, how can we again see this human as someone we need to support, that we need to understand, um, especially all the nuances that go into understanding a neurodivergent individual and who has maybe invisible disability needs and differences and all of those things. So seeing it as someone we need to support, even in those times when it's really easy and we are pulled towards the thing, like whatever it might be, the thing that we must fix or treat, or it has to be this immediate thing. Okay, so we're trying to shift that. And in doing that, trying to create capacity, and I'll talk more about that capacity and community to enhance quality of life, promote wellness, and address inclusion and citizenship. So, this is the human stuff that we're talking about. This is the psychosocial stuff that is just as important, even when stuff gets hard, or stuff comes up for individuals and with individuals. So the intentions behind this then come in a couple different ways. I shared this last time, so I'm not going to go super in depth. I just like to include this as reminders, not only to ourselves, but to the project and thinking about what are our intentions with this process. So the grant efforts, ours are going the full 2 years. So we still have about another year of grant efforts with this as well. So focusing on advocacy, informing some of these systems, models, focusing on community and creating ongoing communities of care and support, and then building capacity. So thinking about building capacity instead of outsourcing or just focusing on it as a training need. How might we actually build capacity within people to support kind of a different way in that route to humanizing and supporting meaningful lives? So lots of stuff involved in this, right? So what we have started doing is creating kind of these jars. So we know this is nuanced. We know there's lots of things that go into um, dehumanizing and the different approaches and all of that, right? So what we tried to do, when I was talking with John O'Brien about this, he was envisioning all these um, he talked about them as bees, I think, like flying around all over. And I switched them to fireflies because I like fireflies. So we're trying to contain, right, all of these fireflies in order to examine them, think about them. So that's kind of that's where this graphic comes from. I wanted to provide some context there. So we have started to think about where are these jars? Where are these jars and kind of what goes into all these different jars? That ultimately is focused on kind of these three groups that we have that I'll talk about more in depth in a second here, about professionals supporting neurodivergent emerging adults, neurodivergent emerging adults themselves, and carers supporting neurodivergent emerging adults. So that could be anybody and anybody who cares, right? It could be professional carers or family carers or parents or guardians or grandparents or just kind of anybody else who cares is what that's why we call it the carers jar there. So it's ultimately thinking about those three groups, right? But then thinking about all the pieces that also impact, influence the growth and development of those different jars and groups. So as I'm going to talk about each one of these jars as we've been thinking about it so far, and as I'm doing that, I'm going to invite you kind of from your lens, from your perspective, wherever you're listening from today, to kind of think about, have we missed any jars? Or thinking about the jars, the labels that we do have we missed anything under those jars? That we're maybe not thinking about. So we'll have some time at the end to talk about that, but just wanted to kind of preface it as we are talking. I'm not going to go super in depth into all the jars right now for sake of timing, but as you're listening, if you could kind of listen for that and think about that today. So before we get into the firefly jars, I want to talk about these three groups. I know I talked about them a little bit last time, but I do want to talk about them a little bit more today. Specifically, we're going to focus today on the professionals supporting neurodivergent emerging adults. As that is the group we have been focusing with initially with Active. So that's kind of our phase one, and then we're gonna talk about the other two groups that are currently in creation right now. So for the professionals supporting neurodivergent emerging adults, we have partnered with Active for that. They partnered in the grant process with us to be this JAR and to join with us. And we've done that in a couple different ways. So the first way we did this was we joined with some professionals at Active on a Humanizing Health and Healing Fellowship opportunity. So what this involved was we first spent about 6 weeks with Active leadership, talking about both Active and kind of this humanizing approach, talking about all the systems, the wall, things like that that contribute here. And in doing that, we co-created a fellowship opportunity with Active leadership that was specific to kind of the Active, where Active was right now. And then they identified kind of the fellows that they wanted to join in that fellowship process. So the fellowship process was a process. You'll hear from some of them today. So what we did is we end up, oh, yes, great question in the chat.
Active has been our home base. Our headquarters is in La Crosse, Wisconsin, where we've been providing services to youth as young as age 5, all the way up to adults nearing that retirement age. We've been in operation for about 45 years throughout Western Wisconsin, providing primarily individuals with a developmental disability, but also a variety of other support areas in a large employment support services, residential services, adult day program services, in community-based living situation, and then a very large youth service area in all of our regions, and really identifying that transition age is an area to focus on, folks that are going to be transitioning from youth services into the adult world in the near future. So just a quick overview about Active.
Thank you so much, Lisa. Partner with Active to try this out, to prototype it. So that's kind of what we're going to talk about for this first part of the professional supporting neurodivergent emerging adults. So we met with the fellows for 2.5 hours every week, virtually, over 18 weeks. So the first 6 weeks really focused on kind of foundational experiential learning. And then after that point, we kind of gauged where folks were at, what folks felt like they needed, and how and if they wanted to continue on. And 100% of the fellows chose to continue on. So then we continued on with 12 weeks of those 2.5 hour virtual sessions that continued with kind of learning, as well as opportunities to think more directly about integrating the learning into their work, their lives, their humanness. So that is kind of the structure of it. And in doing that, we co-created with them, and this is specific to Active, but a humanizing curriculum for the professionals at Active. And then overall, one of the biggest pieces we were focusing on is that humanizing piece, or those psychosocial needs is another way to talk about that humanizing piece. Overall, fellows reported more confidence in both understanding and supporting psychosocial needs after 18 weeks. So that's there's way more that goes into that, but as far as just an overview of what that was like for the fellows, and now we'll hear directly from some of the fellows to give us some firsthand experience of what it was like to be a fellow with us as part of that experience. So I'm gonna just go in order here because that's how they're on here. So I'm gonna first start with Samantha, who's going to share a little bit about her experience.
Thank you, Angela. So I am at one of Aptive's outcome specialists. I am, sorry, my cat's just kind of moving really quick. Um, I am our lead outcome specialist currently, and from our work in the sessions with the Place of Mind folks, it was really helpful in a lot of ways for me personally, especially when like talking about the various topics that we went over in our training sessions. Some of the topics had me really introspecting like about myself in relation to things in my personal life. Specifically, the sections that we went over were ones of like gauging our energy levels and also like boundary setting. So I was able to take time in those sessions to reflect on kind of what those topics meant to me personally. And then in turn, take time to see how they reflect in my professional and work life, and then also how that reflects and applies to the participants that we serve at Active. The fellowship sessions helped me find a lot of new perspectives and approaches in my job obligations at our organization. I work primarily with our youth population and work most directly with like the guardians and families and funding sources for the youth that we serve. One of the things that was incredibly helpful was discussing ways that we could like reframe the questions that we ask our participants and families to get feedback on how they're like feeling within our services. From working with the youth populations, it can sometimes be difficult to get their direct feedback on answers on how they're like enjoying services, and what kind of goals they have for their future, especially like with the kids, they might not always know. And rather than just asking like, do you like coming to Active, or like what kind of goals do you have? One of the ways that the Place of Mind folks had phrased those kind of questions, to get that kind of feedback was asking them instead, like, what would the world look like if you got to choose how it looked? And just like that question in general, like just blew my mind. And I thought was like such a good tool to use for getting their feedback, especially for children. So I thought it was like a really good way for us to get more of an understanding, of our participants in the youth program, as long as they're willing to like sit down and come and talk with us when we go and meet with them. And overall, in the Place of Mind Fellowship, I thought it was just a really good resource for our organization and has still been like shaping the ways that we're going about our everyday work days. I see and hear a lot more feedback within my team of our outcome specialists that focuses a lot on like the participants and the families that we serve and what they would like to get out of our services. Kind of focusing on that like humanizing approach that Angela talked about, which allows for a lot more like collaboration with the families and people that we serve, and helps us to be able to make more progress with like promoting independence with the individuals and participants that we serve. So that is my feedback for the fellowship.
Thank you so much. All right. And now, Morgan.
Hello, everybody. Thank you all for being here. I am so excited to share with you all today how my experience with the fellowship was. I will just start off by saying I am La Crosse Area's neurodiversity navigator. And actually, previous to accepting that position, I was the lead personal cares in our day services program. And somebody just thought my manager at the time thought I'd be a good fit, and I still thank her to this day for recommending me for the fellowship. First of all, I think it really helped bridge a gap between departments that don't normally get a chance to communicate on a day-to-day basis, and especially don't get a chance to communicate and have open conversations about the topics that we covered. They don't just normally come up, naturally in conversation. So it was really cool to talk with people about things that I would never talk with them about. And on top of that, it was a super safe space to explore these topics. I think oftentimes when people try to bring up maybe some of those tougher subjects. There might be that piece of being scared to do so. Scared, people aren't going to agree with you. This fellowship was a place to voice your opinions and your thoughts on things and your experiences without that fear of judgment. And that was the biggest thing for me. Honestly, that and the connections that I made within the not only the company but also with Place of Mind, that is the most valuable thing to me that I hold. And of course, it was incredibly eye-opening and led not only me but our entire organization to start thinking about, finding ways to do differently and to humanize. I think, going through college or anyone else who has gone to college for has had any type of schooling on the stuff that we do, I think oftentimes it's very one note. And it's kind of like this is the only way to do things, this is the right way to do things. And this really kind of opened my eyes up to continuing to be ever evolving, ever changing. So that was very cool. And then the culture of self-care and mindfulness, I really appreciated that throughout the process because, as Angela said, it was a 2.5 hour process. So they were sure to include breaks, icebreakers. We had brain breaks. That was just awesome. And I think it really helped a lot of people like remind themselves, like, hey, we need to take breaks for ourselves. We need to be looking for our boundaries and our self-care and make sure we're taking time to do those things. Because if we can't help ourselves, we can't support anybody else. So, um, of course, the confidence, I think I saw a lot of confidence in people just to speak out about things that maybe they feel passionately about when supporting others. And just a overall better understanding of the work that we do and the departments and everything that goes into supporting an individual. I think that you can get tunnel vision sometimes. So it was really cool for me to see just how many moving parts there are that I previously did not know about. And of course, being in the here and now. In the fellowship, it was almost impossible not to be in the here and now. And that translated into my everyday work. Still to this day, I reference things from the fellowship. Like, for example, we spent some time making our own sensory profiles. And I never would have taken time out of my day to think about the accommodations that maybe I need. Um, and that is just kind of the support that I want that this gave me to give to others. Like I want to make sure that people feel like they have time. We have time in our day. They have time in their day to sit down and figure out what's best for them. Um, and really, I am just so grateful. I am so thankful for all the connections I've made, and I am so much closer to a lot of you. So just thank you so much.
Thank you, Morgan. This is the first time I'm hearing all this too, so I'm just taking it all in. So I really appreciate it. Okay, so Savas, you're up. Oh, you're muted.
How about now? All right. So my name is Savas. I've been working for Aptiv for the past 10 years. And, my current role is the supervisor for our CSO program, or Community Support and Living. So I help individuals be successful living independently at their home. I came into this fellowship. I don't know if it's accident, the correct word for that. I missed the first session, and someone mentioned that I should be part of it. And I jumped right in because I never miss an opportunity to learn something new. Without knowing this will be an 18-week process, 18 Wednesdays in a row was a surprise, but, a nice surprise. Um, this fellowship for me kind of like gave me like I don't know if I can explain myself as nice as Samantha Morgan did, but it gave me like validation
Oh,
of.
Savas, you're kind of cutting out. It's hard to hear you. I want to hear it. So,
Maybe I need to move closer to the computer. Yeah, all right. Is that better? Okay. Um, this fellowship, touched some things I was thinking, to all these years, because it was the first time I had a training that actually talked about the human aspect other than, the medical, um, the paperwork aspect of this job. And, it was something that I always had a kind of like a pull and tag, between, what's necessary and what we need to prioritize for. Um, Before starting working at Aptiv, I never had a training or schooling for, working with adults with disabilities and have that formal how you need to do things specifically, and you learn all those things. So for me, I learned as I went by experience and by, treating everyone the same way you treat people in real life. And this fellowship, it was the first time they actually gave me the go ahead to continue doing that, because I was like, there were times in my work that I was coming against, some people. I was like, no, I'm here to advocate and help them support um, with their needs and not what I want them to do. And sometimes that did not sit well with different other members of their team. You know, uh, it also it was a good thing that we didn't only focus on the participants were helped. We focused on ourselves and how we need to take breaks. Last week we went to the self-determination conference, and it was interesting to hear Morgan bringing up the spoon level. She kept saying my spoons are very low, so I need to go and do something else. If you guys help me out, it's good to connect with things we learn together. But the biggest thing for me was like, we like the permission to, go with my gut in a sense, and continue to treat them the way I want, and not worry about what the other things is, as long as the results. Building that relationship and that trust through human connection. That makes sense.
yes, thank you. So thank you all for sharing. Cassie was not able to be here today, and she chose to share. So one piece of the fellowship, we welcome people to share, participate, communicate in whatever way felt right for them. So for what felt right for her was she shared some information with me written that I have on this slide, and I will just do my best to read it to kind of amplify her voice in that way. I know it's kind of small, but I wanted to get the direct quotes all in here. So she reflected similarly to some of the other fellows on thinking about it for herself as a caregiver, as a provider, and then in her work on joining with individuals. Um, so her first reflections on caregivers and providers. It allowed us to reflect on our jobs and curate strategies that would allow for more energy rather than depletion. Providers and mental health professionals cannot provide quality care and support to those who are in need if we are depleted, not cared for, or not supported. It is important in this field that we also take time to care for ourselves so that we can provide the best possible care for those that we serve. And then her reflections on joining with individuals. A lot of discussion is had with an individual's care team, which in turn leads to decisions being made by those entities rather than the individual. This fellowship has allowed me to broaden my perspective with those we serve and ask the questions directly to them. Hearing the words directly out of the participant's mouth has opened up opportunities for participants and uncovered things I did not know before. Quieting out the noise around and focusing on the individual's wants and needs for their own life has been a change in mindset that I am very grateful for following this fellowship. So that is Cassie's reflections. Okay, so that's one piece of the joint work and co-creation that we got to do alongside as fellows with Aptiv fellows. The next piece that we're not going to spend too much time on today, there will be more coming on this because this is an evolving position and process as well. Morgan already mentioned the neurodiversity navigators. So I will just introduce them both. So Morgan already introduced, and then Brianna is our other neurodiversity navigator. And Brianna is in the Janesville Rock area at Active. So just some general information. These are positions that are within Active and also in collaboration with the grant to think about humanizing, right? So bringing this humanizing stuff, all the nuances and things involved in it within Active culture, services, supports, all of those things. And then also partnering with other groups, individuals, organization efforts that might be outside of Active that are also maybe joining and thinking along the same lines. They will also be co-facilitating our other two groups that I'm going to talk about in a minute here. And then this kind of ongoing joint exploration and emergence of this position, knowing this is a position that we literally made up. So they are co-creating with us and thinking about, where that fits and how it fits. So we are so glad that we have some folks who are collaborating with us in that. More to come on that as it continues to develop and evolve. So overall, kind of thinking about this professionals, whether it be with the fellowship and the neurodiversity navigators. So some of the fellows mentioned some of the topics. So we just added some more information on sort of the topics that we got to think about and reflect on with fellows. So you can see them all here. And then thinking about what the integration or the impact of that learning, not just learning, but what can we do with this learning? What can we do with our own autonomy and self as we integrate and think about this learning and the role we play in these things? So I'm not going to read it word for word right now. It will be, it's up here and it will be on our website too, to go back to, but wanted to include it just as another visual for all the pieces that were involved in this process. So now I'm going to talk about just briefly about the two other groups. There will be more to come on these groups, but they are in current development right now. So the other two groups are neurodivergent emerging adults themselves and the carers. So we have been engaging in individualized co-learning with neurodivergent emerging adults and are in the process of forming a group opportunity for that. Again, it's just a prototype. We're trying it out with a small group of people that's really focusing on self-advocacy and self-understanding in everyday life. And having experiences and opportunities to learn, to experience things in a safe and supportive space. And with that process, just like the professionals process, we are co-creating and will be co-creating a curriculum with the neurodivergent emerging adults themselves. So they are going to act as our content experts. And then ongoing with all of these groups is engaging in opportunities for ongoing communities of care and support, which I'll talk about kind of the platform coming up for that too. The care is supporting neurodivergent emerging adults. Also, we've been in individualized co-learning opportunities with those folks. And we are also creating a group opportunity, although it might look a little bit different than the neurodivergent emerging adults group. But a group opportunity co-facilitated by the Active Neurodiversity Navigators as well. That's going to be focused on similar learning. And also informed by the neurodivergent emerging adult group. And with that, we will be co-creating a curriculum with the carers and also the neurodivergent emerging adults as content experts, kind of like what do you want your carers and people and important people in your life to know and understand, not only about yourself, but all the things we're going to talk about. So it's kind of learning together, although they're not going to necessarily be together all the time, but there may be opportunities for overlap. Who knows? We're going to see what emerges from this. So the whole point of this co-creation is that we have a guide, we have a general structure for this, but we literally are co-creating it as it comes up week after week with folks. So in this group, we'll also sustain with a community of care and support too. Okay, so I'm looking at timing here, and I want to share a little bit about these jars. Like I said, this is a big part of the grant efforts as well that we continue to work on and think about, but I just want to briefly share a little bit right now, at least what we have under the jars. I'm not going to go super in depth as to all the learning and all of that right now. That will be to come, but just to kind of let you know how we're thinking about these different jars. So as we're thinking about this idea of training or certification, I've been talking about these curriculums. So we are co-creating humanizing curriculum with the different groups. So professionals, neurodivergent emerging adults, and the carers. And this curriculum, again, is that humanizing piece that affirms neurodiversity, reclaims, redefines, and seeks wellness for all. So not just for, in the fellowship, folks spoke about it as like, is this for us or is this for the people we support? And both, right? So this humanizing stuff applies to everyone if you're a human. And then thinking about this kind of interrogating the systems and the structures together as far as that wall that we've talked about. And then I'm going to talk about an upcoming training series as well. We're going to be offering free trainings for anybody in the community who wants to attend. So I'm going to put a bookmark. We'll talk about that in a second. I have a flyer for that too. That's the training and certification. The transition piece, again, there's lots when we think about transition, not just transition age, but all of the transitions that happen during that emerging adult years, which again, we're defining from like 15 to 25, give or take some years on either side. So thinking about what is involved in that, schools, services and service systems. There's different coalitions and initiatives around transition that are newer and some that have existed for a while, thinking about that specific transition age. We're kind of broadening that a little bit more, but it overlaps, right? Thinking about eligibility for things, thinking about changes in healthcare, and then changes and transitions in like living and just life itself, right, during this age group. So when we think about transition, I'm not just talking about that transition age that I think it usually gets, transition gets defined as, but just all the stuff that comes up for folks during that time that can allow for lots of opportunity, but can also allow for lots of stuff to come up. Within the context of the long-term care system, which is where we're not only the grant is from, but where we are focusing, is this idea of, again, transition of systems, right? So people are moving from the children's waiver sometimes to the adult waiver, or maybe they're just getting into services for the first time, and all that goes into all of that that is not always humanizing, right? To say the least. Systems, services, supports, lots of losses of structure, support, and socialization, right? That came naturally sometimes with school settings or other ways, but kind of losing some of that. And then we join with a lot of folks who like are going through that transition and just having to make lots of decisions that if you're not in long-term care, you don't have to make at this age, right? So just the stuff that comes up with that and making really big decisions about their life, sometimes without any support or experience to know what the right decision is. And so that becomes, and then that stuff becomes even more difficult to change and adjust. Like once you've made the decision, now it's your new long-term care plan versus changing and adjusting that, knowing that the person is going to change and adjust and develop and evolve a lot, even after that transition age, right? And then thinking about all the other stuff that comes up, guardianship, family considerations, kind of shifts in those roles, and this idea of doing for versus doing with sometimes. And then really this idea of thinking about how to allow for more time, more growth, more experiences. So being able to take risks and try things out, and this idea of learning by living. When people find themselves in the long-term care system, especially the folks who are most at risk for kind of social isolation, and they've got a lot of the things around them that people are focused on, right? Behaviors, diagnoses, concerns, all of those things that often the response is to restrict more versus to really take risks, try things out, do things in a supportive way. So there's just lots of stuff that's tied up into that, that when folks find themselves in the long-term care system, that is now part of their life and livelihood. And sometimes for some people, a large part of their life and livelihood. So we're also trying to focus on beyond long-term care. So noting and noticing that long-term care does not make up a person's whole life, right? Even though it sometimes becomes that for many people, but recognizing that a true, whole, healthy human life also exists outside of the long-term care system. So thinking about beyond long-term care, community partnerships, physical and mental health care, more of that acute care. The legal system sometimes is an overlap here that we connect with and collaborate with. So those kind of is what we've defined as kind of beyond, but interacting with the long-term care system. And then last here, this clinical overlap. So we as clinicians are focused on this piece too, and thinking about how this plays out in that setting as well. So collaboration with physical and mental health care providers and systems. Specifically, our focus at Place of Mind is on mental health. So thinking about disability and neurodiversity affirmative mental health and mental health care and mental health support and assessment and all of those things that are just really important to take neurodiversity and differences into account and not just automatically pathologize, which happens a lot, unfortunately. So we are working on lots of various different collaborations with that too, and joining with professionals in all sorts of ways to just learn more about opportunities that might exist within that to make those systems more affirming of difference and specifically neurodiversity. So, okay. I know I went through those pretty fast, but I wanted to now talk a little bit about the what's coming up. So I talked about those learning sessions, and these are going to be available to anybody in the community, whoever wants to attend. It doesn't matter. You're not limited by, kind of, do you fit perfectly in one of these jars or not? But kind of we're doing a free learning series for individuals. So we don't have, this is a save the date for them right now to know what topics are coming up. There will be more information on our website. And if you subscribe on our website, you will get this information as well, emailed to you, that these are the topics, and we're going to offer an in-person option and a virtual option and a pre-recorded option. So if you could, we'll get it to you some way if you are interested in learning and wanting it. So these are the learning sessions that will happen, and we're trying to go throughout the state to give opportunities for people who want to attend in person to attend these. So they are on here. Our December one in Madison, March in La Crosse area, May in Milwaukee area, and then August in the kind of Wausau area. So those will be in person, but like I said, they'll also be recorded, and they will have a virtual live option too, if we can manage to make all of that work. But for sure, we will get it to you some way if you want to get it. And then after those, following those, we're going to invite people to, those are going to be 3 hours each. And then we're going to invite people to take a lunch break or whatever they might want to do. And then if they want to come back for community conversations, which are going to be similar kind of focus as these, but more about we want to hear from you. What's coming up in your world as it relates to the stuff we've been talking about today. So we will have opportunities to do those in person if people want to and are in person for the training series, the learning session part. And then we'll also offer a virtual option for that as well. So more to come on those. I just wanted to get them out there just so you know kind of what the topics are. If they're hard to read, I can read them for you. The first one is neurodiversity and disability, what we make of brain and body differences, humanizing mental health and neurodivergent flourishing, trauma's influence on the brain, body, and behavior, promoting healing and well-being, and then looking beneath the surface of challenging behavior. So those are all going to be 3-hour training opportunities that are free. And then we're going to have a newsletter as well. So if you subscribe, these info sessions are one way to stay connected, but my hope, especially as we're developing and co-creating some more of these things, including the communities of care and support, that trying to stay connected with people and let people know kind of what's going on and any news or relevant things that are coming up. So that will be an option. Again, if you subscribe to our website, you will get that. Ongoing partnership opportunities. So if you want to be involved in any way, shape, or form, or join with us, feel free to reach out and connect and stay connected. And then I am in the process of working on creating a platform for the communities of care and support. So these will be collective virtual platforms that people can stay connected as we are joining and in this humanizing way.